Welcome back here on Live Now from Fox. My name is Josh Breslow, and I do want to get you right back into some of the big stories that we are covering on this Sunday here. And we continue to follow the growing tension between the U.S. and Iran. Iran's supreme leader warning today that any attack by the U.S. would spark a, quote, regional war in the Middle East. Now, the comments came in a series of X posts today on the X account of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, quote, "The Americans should know if they start a war, this time it will be a regional war." Now, he went on to say that Americans sometimes talk about war, saying we will come with warships and aircrafts is nothing new. The Iranian nation is not affected by such talk. They shouldn't try to intimidate the Iranian nation with such things. Now, those posts ended with, quote, "We are not the initiators of war. We do not seek to oppress anyone. We do not seek to attack any country. However, anyone who seeks to attack or cause harm will face a decisive blow from the Iranian nation." Again, those coming in here just a bit earlier today. The comments from the supreme leader come as the Wall Street Journal is reporting via Pentagon sources that the U.S. could conduct, quote, limited strikes on Iran as early as today if ordered. And the Israel War Room on X saying the chief of staff for the Israel Defense Forces is in Washington, or was this weekend, to talk Iran and what happens next. President Trump was asked about Iran earlier today, just about an hour ago, as he attended a wedding at Mar-a-Lago.
Sir, on Iran, the Supreme Leader today said that U.S. attack could spark a regional war. Do you have any response to that, sir?
Why wouldn't he say that? Of course you're going to say that, but we have the biggest, most powerful ships in the world over there, very close, a couple of days, and hopefully we'll make a deal. If we don't make a deal, then we'll find out whether or not he was right.
Again, that was President Trump just about an hour ago there as he attended a wedding at Mar-a-Lago, asked about this and other topics. Now, I do want to discuss really all of these developments as there are so many of them. Let's bring in Jonathan Sayeh, Iran analyst at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Thank you so much, as always, for taking the time to be here with us.
Hi, Josh. It's great to be with you again.
And I did want to start by asking you about the comments here that were made by Ali Khamenei. Now, we saw those kind of posted in what some might refer to as an X rant a bit earlier on today. What do you make of all of that? Is that a threat, or what should we take away from it, if anything?
It is a deliberate threat, not just against the U.S. personnel, but also U.S. embassies in the region. Other officials have threatened to go after different diplomatic outposts across the Middle East. Now, this has been Tehran's narrative that has been propagating for decades, claiming that any attack against the Islamic Republic would lead to instability across the region. That said, it is because of the Islamic Republic that this region has been so unstable, and there hasn't been a U.S. attack against Iranian infrastructure yet. So when you look at Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, the chaos that you see across the region, of course, is all fueled by the Islamic Republic. So there's that contradiction there. And again, this is propaganda by the Islamic Republic trying to deter any potential attack, claiming that it would lead to more war around the globe, whereas in reality, they have been the ones who've been perpetuating all these different terror activities and plots across the region.
One thing that's interesting is we've heard from the Wall Street Journal now reporting via Pentagon sources that the U.S. could potentially conduct, quote unquote, limited strikes versus maybe the decisive action that President Trump had talked about previously. Do we have any idea what the difference is there between limited strikes and decisive action?
The idea of limited strikes came about a few weeks ago when President Trump was trying to perhaps express solidarity with the Iranian protesters, going beyond just rhetoric and actually targeting certain institutions within Iran that are responsible for the repression, given that over 30,000 unarmed people have died in Iran, killed by the hands of security officials. So in that context, maybe a symbolic attack, quote unquote limited, would have been targeting a few pillars or organizations, institutions that are responsible for the repression, such as IRGC headquarters, Basij, or law enforcement headquarters. That was in that context. We're past that point now. Tensions are high, and the other way of looking at it is ultimately, despite all the ongoing unrest, Israel and the United States were concerned about the regime's ballistic missile program. Their nuclear issue is not fully resolved either. So if, in case you were to go after all these things that I mentioned, you would have to ensure that the regime cannot retaliate. So a limited strike in this concept wouldn't really satisfy anyone's need. It would not halt regime repression. It would not halt a ballistic missile program or their nuclear activities. Again, if we're talking about getting into a potential confrontation with the Islamic Republic, any strike needs to be a campaign that would really ensure that they cannot retaliate and the repression ends.
All of this, of course, kind of up in the air right now. We don't have any crystal ball. We don't know exactly what's going to happen in the coming hours and days. But as we watch this kind of all play out, there was a lot of, I guess you could say, rumblings there on social media yesterday with pictures of explosions, blasts that took place across Iran in several different areas. Do we have any more information on what may have caused that and if this is military involved in any way?
We cannot know for sure. We're still relying on rumors, but we do have a good framework that would tell us what these explosions could be. So shortly after the June 12-day war between Israel and Iran, about July, we started to see a wave of explosions happening across the country. And it was primarily targeting residents of military officials, designated terror organizers like the IRGC, for example, officials. That was one primary target of these explosions. Another one was going after the military infrastructure, ensuring that they cannot rebuild their capacity, whether it was about fuels for ballistic missiles or centrifuges or what have you. So those usually tend to be the targets of such a potential campaign. Realistically, if there were to be one, it is led by the Mossad, given its operational capacity inside Iran. Again, we don't know for a fact what the details hold. But that said, I can tell you what the perception is inside Iran. And the perception right now is the regime does not have the upper hand when it comes to intelligence. So they're realistically always outmaneuvered by Mossad. And that has caused a lot of chaos. And to be more precise, it has caused a lot of paranoia amongst regime officials. Even they themselves don't know who's behind these acts. And that has created really an opportunity to leverage the difference and the competition within the regime that are increasingly fearful of one another.
Talking about the situation with the protests, of course, we've seen them kind of wind down. We are seeing less of that than we saw several weeks ago. And we heard from President Trump maybe a little more than a week ago. He was saying that about 800 executions had been stopped. Iran was not going to execute those folks who were involved in the protests. Do we have any idea, because we are also seeing reports coming out of Iran that there may be some executions that are happening? Do we have kind of a clear understanding of whether or not Iran is conducting these executions?
We know for a fact that they are currently executing not only just criminals or people who are arrested of, let's say, drug-related crimes, they are executing political detainees. That has been going on. There has been no halt to that, period. I think it was this Wednesday that they executed someone on the sham charges of having, quote-unquote, been an Israeli spy. The week prior to that, again, there were a couple of political detainees that were executed. The week prior to that, also, there was other examples. So this campaign hasn't stopped. There might be threats coming from Washington that might delay or postpone certain executions, but you're talking about a regime that's the highest executioner per capita. Without a doubt, they will continue these executions. And we know for a fact they do because they announce it. So this is a terrorizing tactic. The Islamic Republic does not hide its executions. It actually announces all of them. It's not just a matter of opinion. The judiciary declares all these executions, informing the public that this is your fate if you continue to protest. So they're very clear. And more importantly, they sent a very, very clear signal to Washington saying that no amount of pressure is going to get you regime change behavior. The regime is not going to change its behavior no matter how much pressure is on it. Executions, repression is ingrained in the Islamic Republic's DNA, and the only way to move past that is if we were to see regime collapse.
The IDF chief, the Israel Defense Forces chief of staff, was in Washington this weekend, according to reports there. And I want to get your take on whether or not there is anything to read into that, as allegedly those talks were about Iran.
There certainly is. Looking at the region, Israel has been the most prominent ally that's been helping the United States in countering this shared threat. Other neighboring countries are from the Persian Gulf are benefiting from this status quo. They want a weak Islamic Republic by their borders, such as Saudi Arabia, Qatar. They're happy with how things are. They don't want to see regime change for a variety of reasons. Israel, on the other hand, has been on America's side when it comes to battling whether it's the Islamic Republic's terror plots or ballistic missile program, and more importantly, nuclear. So any attack against this regime would realistically have to be to an extent coordinated with Israelis, given that they're the ones who have initiated the 12-day war. They know how to go about it. They have operational capacity on the ground. So that coordination is very, very important. Although Israel has not really sent a public signal about whether it's going to get involved in a potential kinetic strike or not, regime officials have preemptively warned that any attack from the Islamic Republic would mean that Iran would target Israel. And drawing Israel into this conflict would be detrimental to the Islamic Republic. But that said, not all leaders within that framework are rational thinkers. We cannot expect to see really clear decision-making from the leaders in Tehran. There are issues and irrational decisions that are made often.
I want to pop up these photos that were obtained just a couple days ago right here. I'm sure you've seen them by now, but essentially what they are is satellite imagery that's showing renewed activity there at two of the Iranian nuclear sites that were struck by the U.S. back several months ago in June of last year. So what can we say about the current status of Iran's nuclear program based on what's publicly known at this point? What we're seeing is the construction of what appears to be roofs over some of these sites.
What we do know for a fact that has been reported on widely is that even though the Islamic Republic's enrichment capacity has been disrupted, meaning currently they're not able to enrich uranium to push it beyond weapons grade, even though they've been doing that prior to the 12-day war. So the attack led by the United States against this nuclear apparatus has been the only achievement that has been able to actually halt enrichment. No deal was able to achieve that, just to be clear. Now, what does remain right now is the uranium that has already been enriched. Now, that could again play into the regime's calculus when it comes to weaponization. That is what we know right now. More importantly, going beyond capacity, it's also about intent. Even during the 2015 nuclear deal between the Obama administration and the Islamic Republic, the regime was still enriching uranium in undeclared locations. So this intent of moving with weaponization, whether covertly or overtly, has not gone away with the Islamic Republic. They see it as deterrence, and they see it as an existential threat if they were to go with disarmament. They know what happened with Gaddafi, and this is a regime that realistically would not actually give up its nuclear program. And giving up a nuclear program, quote unquote, is realistically giving up enrichment capacity on their soil. And they have not shown any willingness to do that.
At this point, we're just kind of watching how everything plays out. There are all kinds of developments that are taking place pretty much on an hourly basis. So what do we watch for here in the coming hours and days?
Normally, I would say we have to watch for any military buildup or any drills from the Islamic Republic, any rhetoric coming from whether Washington or Tehran about escalations, and we're actually seeing all of that right now. So the only thing that's really missing is the strike itself. The coordination between Israel and America has happened. We know Iranian officials traveled to Moscow recently, hoping that to get some aid from Kremlin. Realistically, it's doubtful whether it's going to happen. Their armed forces are on high alert. Our biggest fleet is in the region. So all the signs are pointing at a potential strike. Unlikely for it to be limited given the scale of the buildup. So at this point, we just have to watch, see what the president decides to do.
All right, Jonathan, as always, thank you so much for taking the time to be here. We covered a lot of ground, but anything we missed that you want to make sure to mention here before I let you go?
I think we covered it all, but again, just highlighting that executions in Iran have not stopped. The movement as a whole has not stopped. So meaning there is momentum on the ground. There's still an opportunity to really capitalize on this anti-regime sentiment, to really push this illegitimate regime towards its collapse. It's not about boots on the ground. It's about effective communication with the Iranian people. If there were to be a kinetic campaign, we want to ensure that it does not deter protests, but actually encourages them.
All right, Jonathan, thank you so much for being here with us. We definitely appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
All right, we are going to sneak away for a quick 2-minute commercial break here, 2:44 on the East Coast and 11:44 on the West Coast. My name is Josh Breslow, and you're watching Live Now from Fox.